Thinking about moving to Boston and wondering if you can actually afford to live here in 2025, you're definitely not alone. I hear this all the time from buyers almost every week. Is Boston really that expensive? Why is Boston that expensive? And perhaps most importantly, what am I actually paying for? So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the true cost of living in Boston here in 2025 and as we look ahead to 2026. Everything from housing to taxes to groceries to utilities to transportation, and even some of those everyday expenses that might sneak up on you. So by the end of this video, you have a clear, realistic picture of what it takes to live comfortably in Boston and whether it fits what you're looking for, and again, most importantly, your budget. So let's get started. Let's begin with the big one, housing, because this is where Boston's cost of living really begins to show itself. Now, I'm going to be going through some facts, some figures, some numbers, trying not to go cross-eyed. Don't fall asleep. These are important, but there's going to be a bit of them. Now, we're working with the median home price as opposed to average home price. Median home price gives us the most accurate picture of the numbers as it pertains to the housing market, as opposed to average home price, where some outliers can really skew those numbers. And we've been through enough of 2025 here that we have some firm figures as it pertains to this year. So as of 2025, the median home price just across the city is just under $800,000, $795,000 to be exact. But that single number doesn't tell the whole story, because Boston market is really two different markets: single families, condominiums. We'll get in the rental market later. So if we're talking about single family homes in Boston, the median home price right now is over $900,000, so $925,000 to be exact, which is roughly up 4% from last year. Now, in neighborhoods like Dorchester, Hyde Park, Roslindale, you're going to see homes in the $700,000 to $900,000 range. Move into Jamaica Plain and West Roxbury, not too far away, that number climbs closer to the $1 million mark, usually between $900,000 and $1.1 million, depending on size, updates, square footage, number of bedrooms, all those factors. Now, if you're trying to land a single family in places like Beacon Hill or the South End, you're easily crossing into the $1.5 million range, sometimes much more. Those can easily get into 2, 3, 4, and depending, 5 and above. Again, depending on the type of single family, square footage, all those good things. Now, for condominiums, the median home price sits more towards that first number we mentioned. For condos, it sits around $760,000 with an average about $850 per square foot, if that's the way you approach kind of property values and offer prices and list prices and all those things. Now, around areas like East Boston or Brighton, so east of the city or west of the city, they still offer some new developments in the mid-6s, mid-7s, while South Boston, that is an area that definitely continues to see strong demand. Those condominium prices are really averaging closer to $900,000, especially for modern 2-bed units. If you're looking downtown, Back Bay, Seaport, Fenway area, those numbers again going to rise, climb quickly, exponentially even, often breaking that $1 million mark or line, if you will. And that's going, again, for luxury properties, that's going above and beyond, past the $1 million range into the multi-million-dollar range. And so you're dealing with high home prices when it comes to Boston comparative to other metropolitan cities around the country. Now, renters aren't exactly off the hook either. A 1-bedroom apartment in downtown Boston usually will run about $3,000 to $3,300 a month, we'll call it, so $3,000 to $3,500 a month, while neighborhoods in East Boston, Roslindale, Brighton, you can find some rental prices closer to kind of the mid 2,500 range. So let's say 2,200 to 2,700 either side of that. 2 bedrooms, you're into 3,000. There was a time where 1-bedroom apartments had one at the beginning of that number. They're in the 1,000-ish per month range. 2 bedrooms were in the $2,000 range, and so on and so forth. But now 2 bedrooms firmly in that $3,000 range. Call it $3,400 to $4,000 a month. Those are the prices we're looking at. So the biggest takeaway, if you're still with me here on all these facts and figures and these numbers and these housing prices, the biggest takeaway is that housing prices in Boston, they just vary wildly depending on the neighborhood. Two buyers with identical budgets can end up living completely different lives, completely different lifestyles, depending on where they choose to go home. And that's why I always tell my clients, your daily routine, your commute, the kind of atmosphere, vibe you're looking for in your neighborhood will really influence the real cost of living just as much as the purchase price of where you're living. So if you want me to break down different Boston neighborhoods that give you the most bang for your buck in 2025, and as we look ahead to 2026, just drop a comment down in, well, the comments below, say neighborhood guide, and I'll make a video walking through what neighborhood you want to see me break down. Now let's talk about what comes after you buy, because unfortunately your mortgage isn't going to be the only thing on your monthly bill. Now let's start off with Boston property taxes. Now these are going to be more of a quarterly expense as opposed to monthly expense, but something you need to take into account when you're budgeting for your day-to-day, your month-to-month, your year-to-year living here in Boston. Now, the 2025 Boston property tax rate sitting at roughly $10.68 per $1,000 of assessed value. Now, I know I'm getting to facts and figures and numbers again, so again, stay with me. So what does that mean? So when you purchase a home, know that your assessed value is pretty much going to be right at whatever the purchase price is or very close to it. So for example, if you bought a condo for $800,000, your annual property tax bill is going to be between roughly $8,500 to $9,000 for the year. Now, some nearby towns that shift slightly. For example, Brookline's a little bit higher than Boston when it comes to its tax rate, Quincy a little bit lower. So if you're looking outside of Boston, make sure you check the tax rates for the various towns or cities you're interested in because they do vary from town to town, city to city. Now, let's talk about home insurance. That typically runs between $1,500 to $2,000 per year, again, depending on the type of home and the location. People ask me a lot, how do I start to explore home insurance? I always say the first conversation, if you have auto insurance, should be with that company because typically those companies will offer good benefits and good rates if you're bundling auto and home insurance together. So check that first, and then of course you can talk to other insurance companies to check rates, benefits, and again, all those things. For condo owners, HOA fees are another cost you need to take into consideration. Now those roughly span from $400 to $800 a month. I always say if you're $500 or below, you're in pretty good shape when it comes to a monthly condo fee here in Boston and the surrounding areas. Now, when you start to get some of the amenities like swimming pools, pickleball courts, tennis courts, fitness centers, gyms, you can easily see those condo fees go up towards and over $1,000 a month. So again, if you're, I'd say $500 or $600 per month on your HOA fee, again, you're in pretty good shape relative to a lot of communities here in the Boston area. Then you need to add in utilities like heat, electricity, cable internet. Most homeowners are spending about $300 to $500 a month total to keep things running smoothly. I know for my gas bill, that's nominal. It's about $10 to $20 a month. My electric, depending on the month, time of the season, can be below $100 and go up to north of $200. And of course, for cable internet's pretty cheap. I'd say $75 a month. Then you start to add in, I'm a cord cutter, but all the streaming packages and streaming channels, again, that $300 to $500 a month, I think pretty accurate for the utility monthly total here in Boston. Now, these are just real world numbers. These are the kind of costs I see every week and every month working with buyers across the city. So when you're budgeting, just make sure you're accounting for the full picture and not just the sale price of the home. Next up, let's keep talking taxes. Why wouldn't we? It's such a fun topic, right? But I'll keep this section shorter compared to the section we just went through. So straight off the bat, Massachusetts has a flat state income tax rate of 5%, which is actually lower than states like California and New York. But Boston also has a few local fees, some state taxes that can sneak up on you if you're not aware or if you're a new resident, for example. So for example, one of these local taxes or state taxes, Boston has a vehicle excise tax, which runs about $25 per $1,000 of the car's value. This is all to say, if you're driving something newer or higher end, that cost can obviously add up pretty quickly. So just make sure you're aware of that. Street parking permits are free for residents. They do cost usually a nominal fee in certain towns and cities outside of Boston, but finding an open spot, well, that's something money can't buy, right? There's no money value on that. That is the real challenge in and around Boston sometimes. Now, if you're investing in a short-term rental or Airbnb, know that the city has a roughly 14.5% combined lodging taxes. So that takes into account state, city, and convention fees. So again, 14.5%, that's a sizable percentage. So if you're planning to buy for short-term use, just make sure you're factoring that early. Now, none of these numbers, none of these taxes or fees are deal breakers by any means, but it's always just better to understand the fine print of Boston's cost structure and again, those fees, those taxes before making the move so you can account for them, right? Let's talk about transportation costs because getting around Boston can be both convenient or costly, depending on your setup. So gas prices right now in Massachusetts, or what's called the Boston area, hovering about $3.60 per gallon. And if you park downtown, garage spots can run you about $300 to $450 per month. So no small chunk of change there. Now the MBTA or the T, Boston subway and bus system, remains one of the best cost-saving options when it comes to transportation. People like to rail on the T a little bit, and that's a pun intended, but it is a very good option for getting you from point A to point B. Now, a monthly pass on the T costs about $90. It's going to cover unlimited rides on most lines. So for commuters who live near a T stop or not too far away from a T stop, that can save you several $1,000s per year as opposed to driving and parking every day or a couple times per week. Now, there are ride shares. They are plentiful here in Boston, be it Uber or Lyft. Short city trips, going to run you, say, $10 to $15. Rides outside the city, going to be more towards $20, $30. But when you're dealing with rides downtown, you're more often than not dealing with surge pricing, to be fair, because there's just a lot happening downtown, a lot of events, sporting events, games, whatever. So a lot of people are calling for ride shares at the same time. And so that surge pricing is something you have to deal with or contend with, I'd say more often than not. So just be aware that, yeah, $10 to $15 for maybe a quick ride within the city, but if there's something going on, those prices are going to be going up. Now, the good thing about Boston is the layout encourages accessibility, walkability. So if you're strategic about where you live, you can actually reduce those transportation costs dramatically. I've had people who have moved here from kind of car dependent areas or cities or towns, and they realize they might be able to ditch their vehicle entirely after moving here, and they've been able to save thousands of dollars each year from moving to Boston, being strategic about where they moved, and being able to kind of ditch that car, or at least not have to rely on it so much and reduce those costs. Now, utility costs are another item that can catch people off guard here sometimes. Now, I know we touched on utility costs a little bit earlier on in this video, but let's break it down a little bit further. For most Boston households, electricity and gas all together combine about $175 to $250 per month. Based on my experience and my utility costs, I would say that's an accurate range. Of course, that can go up and down per month depending on the season, the weather outside, and so forth. Water sewer bills, about $80. And internet service ranges between $70 and $100 per month, depending on the provider. Again, I'm about $75 per month with my provider. Of course, I subscribe to way too many streaming channels, and that adds to my cost. So whether you're doing a lot of streaming channels or not, or maybe getting that high-end cable package or not, that's obviously going to affect your cost. Now, if you're in an older home, brownstone or colonial, and especially one that has or runs on oil heat, your winter bills can obviously spike quickly as you're using up that oil. And oil prices go up and down with oil prices. That can vary from month to month, year to year, can vary wildly. So just make sure you're checking in on the oil costs for wherever neighborhood or town, city that you're looking at a home if it runs on oil. Now, newer condos in theory in places like South End, East Boston, Seaport, they're being built these days to be more energy efficient. So again, in theory, that's supposed to keep monthly costs a little more predictable year round. And so again, rather than spiking so much from year to year, or month to month, or season to season, hopefully you have a firm sense of what those costs are and a little more predictable. And as we're talking about utility costs, here's a tip I always share with buyers. If we're touring a home or you're at an open house and you're asking questions of the listing agent, make sure you ask this question. What are the average utility costs? Obviously, they can differ greatly from home to home and neighborhood to neighborhood, but it's one of the simplest ways to get an answer to this question or get a sense of those costs and avoid surprises later. Now let's talk about the entertainment options and kind of the cost of going out in Boston, because while Boston is one of the most historic and oldest cities in America, it's definitely a modern city, it's a social city, and so the cost of heading out for a night can add up for sure. So let's start to go through some of the options here and the cost of heading out. For example, dinner for two at a nice restaurant, gonna run you about $120 to $150. Again, for a nice meal at a nice restaurant. Local craft beer, and I feel like craft beers have become a big thing here in Boston, like they have a lot of different places, about $8 to $10 for beer. Movie tickets, about $16 to $20. Now, if you're going to a 3D IMAX on opening night or whatever, it's going to be more than that. Now, if you're into fitness, gym memberships, the costs actually, they are pretty disparate, a pretty wide range. So you can find gyms, monthly memberships that cost as little as $20 per month. You can go high end and they can be as expensive as $150 per month. It's just kind of what the experience you want. I'm on the cheaper side of that spectrum, as you might be able to tell just by looking at me. Regardless, Boston is big on experiences, from concerts at Fenway, festivals along the Charles River, just going to grab brunch in the South End, for example. So it is a city that rewards getting out and enjoying everything around you, but that's where the cost can build up unexpectedly if you're going out a whole lot. Now, if you're coming from a smaller city, you might be surprised at how those, hey, let's just go grab a bite moments kind of add up, not just the number of times you're heading out, but of course, the costs therein and how that adds up as well. All right, let's shift gears for a moment and talk quickly about healthcare here in Boston, because it is a major factor when you're talking about Boston's cost of living. Now, the city is known for its world-class hospitals and health systems, Beth Israel, Brigham and Women's, Mass General. That quality can come with a price. Now, here in 2025, individual health insurance premiums average about $400 to $700 per month for adults buying private plans. If you're self-employed, those costs can be higher. Now, most co-pays for doctor visits here in Boston going to run between $30 and $50 per visit. Prescription drugs vary from $10 to $60, of course, depending on the medication. Now, if you work for a major employer here in Boston, the chances that you're going to have strong health coverage or strong insurance coverage going to be pretty high. Now, if you're a freelancer, entrepreneur, newcomer, is still in the job hunt here, hasn't found employment, health care and the cost therein definitely something you're going to need to plan for. So obviously we've talked a lot about the different costs of living here in Boston. But when it's all said and done, what does it take to really live comfortably here in Boston as we roll through 2025 and into 2026? So according to the MIT Living Wage Calculator, a single adult needs about $85,000 per year to live comfortably in the city. For a household that has 2 to 4 people, that number is going to jump closer to $140,000 to $160,000. That's going to cover rent, a moderate mortgage, transportation, groceries, taxes, some entertainment, nothing extravagant, but just being comfortable, living comfortably in the city. Now, if you're looking for a lifestyle that has a lot of going out, eating out, going to events, games, all that, or you're a lot of travel, or you're looking for a newer condo downtown, of course your number is going to climb higher. But again, this is where your neighborhood choice is just going to play a massive role. Living just a few minutes or miles outside of downtown or outside of the city, if you're looking at places like Malden or Quincy or Medford, that can easily save you 15 to 25% on your monthly costs with, again, not sacrificing that access to downtown. So just make sure you're taking into account the cost of living downtown or perhaps the money you can save by living close to downtown. Now listen, there's just no way around this. Boston is expensive. But here's the thing, people don't move here because it's necessarily the most affordable city, because it isn't compared to many of the cities in the country. But they move here for opportunity, quality of life, whatever those reasons are. And you're not just paying for square footage, you're paying for a close-knit city, literally, accessible, walkable neighborhoods, world-class education, history, culture, deep sense of community. It's one of the few cities in the US where history and innovation can kind of coexist on the same corner. So the key is to know your priorities. You got to have that strategy. If you're strategic, if you know about the neighborhood, your home type, if you know about your long-term goals, then Boston can absolutely be worth the cost. So if you're thinking about making the move, reach out. My info is right here on the screen and down below. I'd love to help you figure out what's going to make the most sense and where you will best fit in the Boston area when it comes to your budget and your lifestyle. So there you have it, the updated cost of living in Boston here in 2025. Everything you need to know before making the move here to the Boston area. So if you found this video and this breakdown helpful, make sure you like, hit subscribe, ring that bell so you never miss any of the videos we're putting out here on this channel. Make sure you stick around for our next video popping up here where we dive in some of the neighborhoods we've been discussing and show you what each has to offer. So appreciate you watching here today, watching this video. We'll see you in the next one.